Now, I'm joined by Mark Francois, Member of Parliament for Rayleigh and Wickford, Conservative, of course. We've had this extraordinary judgment today, or perhaps it's not extraordinary, that Mr. Justice Humphreys has said that aspects of the Rwanda Act are incompatible with our old friend, the European Convention on Human Rights, and therefore, he says that the Rwanda Act will be disapplied to a part of the United Kingdom. And I think back to what Boris Johnson said about the original Brexit deal, to what Rishi Sunak span after the Windsor Framework. We need to be a bit more honest about this. Northern Ireland is now a different legal territory, isn't it?
I think technically the judgment related to the Illegal Migration Act, not the Rwanda Act per se.
Well, actually, it applied to that, and it also applied to the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah.
Because ECHR, it's actually quite a big issue, this.
Fair enough. I'll come back to that. So look, I haven't had time to read the judgment in detail, Nigel, and one of the things I learned from you is anything to do with the EU, you always read the small print, right? Okay.
Quite right.
But nonetheless, what we know is the Prime Minister said very clearly this afternoon the government are going to appeal against the judgment. Yep. I welcome that. It's the right thing to do. But the problem with that is that, this could all become drawn out and protracted in the courts. Now, my initial understanding, subject to reading the judgment, is this won't immediately affect the ability of flights to take off to Rwanda. It would particularly affect those people in Northern Ireland. But nonetheless, it's all part of this wider issue about the ECHR and how that interacts with, UK legislation passed by our sovereign parliament. So we're going to have to see how all of this plays out.
Yeah, unravelling it. I want to leave ECHR. I'm unequivocal about that, but I accept the unravelling is going to be a very, very lengthy process, and we need a government that is absolutely committed and determined to do it. Of that, there is absolutely no doubt. But are you confident, for one moment, part Northern Ireland, as they have been part legally, are you confident that the Illegal Migration Act, that the Rwanda proposals, are you really confident this is going to work? Because you wrote into the legislation that Articles 2 and 3 of the Human Rights Act should be disapplied, but that court in Strasbourg is still there. And it's all well and good coming up to an election for the Prime Ministers to say, well, if I'm given a choice between what's in our national interest and what a foreign court says, I'll do the right thing. He doesn't really mean it, does he?
Well, Nigel, I won't try and change history in your studio. You know that I voted against that bill.
No, you did.
Because I didn't feel that it was as legally watertight as I and some of my colleagues, like Sir Bill Cash, who understand these matters in great detail, like Robert Jenrick, like Suella Braverman. We all had concerns about whether it was absolutely legally watertight. The truth is, over the next few months, we're going to find out. I very much hope that these flights do take off. But fundamentally, all of these legal roads lead back to the ECHR. So my personal view is, that document was drafted over 70 years ago after the end of the Second World War for perfectly honourable reasons, but it's now been overtaken by events. So I would like to see us attempt to renegotiate it. I'm sure the Italians would be up for that, the Poles and others would. But if that renegotiation were to fail, and I would like to see that commitment in a Tory party manifesto, by the way, if that renegotiation were to fail, I believe we have to walk away. And as you know, there's no point going into negotiation if the other side know you're not prepared to walk away. That's what happened to Cameron.
We learned that with David Cameron.
Right.
Absolutely. But isn't the issue here, isn't the truth of it, that the modern-day Conservative Party is as split over ECHR as it was over Brexit?
Not quite. Let me give you just to take your question seriously. What I've just said, we should have in the manifesto that we should renegotiate, but if renegotiation fails, we should leave. You would find, and get them on here and ask them, there are prominent members of the One Nation group who would sign up to that. How do I know? I've talked to them about it. So I think you could probably get Damien Green and I to agree that form of words or something very similar to it going into a general election. The question is, with the Cabinet.
I wonder. I really do wonder. Now, moving on, Gibraltar. Gibraltar's status, ever since we joined the European Union, has been a very odd one. That there it was, sort of a member of the European Union, but outside the VAT regime, in a very, very, unusual position.
Yeah.
And the truth about the border, of course, is that the Spanish were being beastly on the border, even when we were members of the European Union.
They were. When we had all this influence and pull.
And sometimes there were 5 or 6 hour waits and all the rest of it. But the big row now is whether British citizens flying into Gibraltar, into that quite terrifying strip with the sea on either end of it.
I've done it.
Yeah. And as you say, the Royal Air Force are there. It's a Royal Air Force base. But it would appear we're on the verge, and some say that Lord Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, is on the verge of doing a deal with the Spanish whereby actually British citizens could be refused entry into Gibraltar, because we'd actually move the border from the border to the airport inside Gibraltar. Do you know what the truth of this is?
Well, we don't, because we haven't seen a draft treaty. And importantly, if there's going to be a treaty, there will very likely have to be a bill. Mm-hmm. So that means debate in Parliament, which the government might be a bit anxious about. Now, in terms of the always read the small print, Sir Bill Cash's European Scrutiny Committee, they recently wrote to the Junior Minister David Rutley a very punchy letter that I've got here. Won't read the whole thing, but it basically says we're uneasy about this, particularly the sovereignty in the airport. On the 23rd of May, Lord Cameron is now giving evidence to Sir Bill's European Scrutiny Committee.
Okay.
So that will be the time when they'll go through it in chapter and verse.
Yeah.
But I think the real bottom line is, if it's going to be a treaty, there'll have to be a bill, and that means that the whole of Parliament will get involved. It could be the government will be anxious about that.
OK, well, I will hope you can get hold of the slippery eel that Cameron often proves to be and get some firm numbers.
Last thing, just quickly, remember, this has been the case for many years. Defence and foreign affairs are, if you like, reserved matters for the United Kingdom.
Yes.
So when it comes to, the airbase, the berth for nuclear submarines, which is vitally important in the defence of the Mediterranean, certain storage facilities at Gibraltar, which I'm not going to go into in public, these are all defence assets for the United Kingdom and our role in the Western Alliance. So anything at all which impinges on our freedom of action to use them is completely unacceptable.
And that's why these stories are so disturbing.
Correct.
Because of the sheer significance, and geography of Gibraltar.
Yeah.
Mark Francois, as ever, thank you.